You're listening to The Green Flag with your hosts, Lukas Wacker and Kyle Cushman.
Well. Look who's back.
No kidding.
Little bit of a hiatus, Kyle.
It's been a while.
A little bit of a break. We took a break. But now we're back and back for real. One episode per week. This is your stop. The Green Flag is officially back here on YouTube, and we're going to be back on social media as well. Senior year kind of got us like a little bit busy, I'd say. So we just took that little bit of break off. Of course, we haven't done anything in 2022 when it comes to NASCAR, but it is good to be back. Kyle, here we are.
It's been way too long. I couldn't wait for this, honestly. It's been way too long since we've been able to get here, talk some motorsports, talk some NASCAR playoffs and everything. Like, the timing of it just worked out too well for us. But yeah, as you mentioned, last year's school is all done and dusted. There was a lot to kind of get through with internships and jobs and school and everything. So we made the decision to kind of take the first 75% of the NASCAR schedule off, but we're back, and we're back with like full force. We're back to do this for real. So if you're still here after that long, thank you very much. If you're new, welcome aboard. It's going to be a great ride. And today's a great episode to get things started with.
Yes, it is. We are back at the perfect time. Playoffs are starting this weekend at Darlington after a dramatic regular season finale at Daytona. And of course, we had to return with our playoff predictions. This is something we've done for the past 2 seasons. We're here for a third, and we're looking forward to bringing that all to you guys here today in this episode. And we're also going to be switching up our fantasy segment. If you are a former fan of the show and you're back here again, thank you very much. But we're switching up the fantasy where we're not going to put it in the NASCAR fantasy app this time around. We're going to do a little bit more of a draft week to week where we cannot have the same picks for either of us, 5 picks each. And we'll go into that a little bit later on. So stay tuned for that if you want to get into kind of what we're looking at for Darlington specifically. But this is for the playoffs. This is the big picture here. And it all starts at Darlington this weekend. And we got to go round by round, round 16, round of 12, round of 8. And of course, our championship 4, with the champion being crowned at Phoenix in 10 weeks time. So lots to get into in today's episode. And I think we go right into it here, Kyle, with the round of 16 looking a little bit newly refreshed. We've got a new 1.5 miles in there. Kansas takes the previous spot there of Vegas moving into a little bit later slot there in the round of 8. So it cools down the temperatures, hopefully there. And then we'll see how that plays a factor into it. But we've got Darlington to kick it off, Kansas, and then the cutoff race being Bristol in the round of 16. So Kyle, you want to lead us off with who do you have first out in the round of 16?
Going right into things. And I won't start with maybe the one that everyone is looking at based off of the events of what happened over the weekend. But I will start with a former winner this year. It's hard not to, given how many of them there are. But I'll start with Chase Briscoe here. An early winner at the championship finale race of Phoenix. But for Chase Briscoe here, I just haven't seen enough consistency and enough consistent speed. And looking over the last handful of races, they've struggled to run inside the top 10, let alone finish inside the top 10. They don't have a lot of points buffer or anything like that in terms of stage points and things accrued over the season. They did have a couple interesting strategy calls at road courses and such to get them a point here or there, in addition to the 5 for the win, of course. But overall, I just look at the 3 races here, how competitive the entire playoff grid is. And I just haven't seen quite enough from Chase Briscoe as of late to have them as a solid threat to make it through to the round of 12. So Chase Briscoe is going to be my first elimination in the round of 16.
Yeah, same here. Chase Briscoe, I was very impressed with him early on in the season.
Really
seemed like
early.
He was going to be a dark horse, kind of top 10 contender week in and week out. And then somewhere along the line, Stewart-Haas Racing kind of lost that momentum mid-season. They're early, the third part of the season, I'd say. Then Kevin Harvick has picked it up, obviously, in the later stages here to get those 2 victories late in the regular season. But for Chase Briscoe, I think he could be in too big of a hole post-Kansas. I don't think Darlington or Kansas really is his best racetrack. Their short track stuff hasn't been too bad, where I think that they could recover some points if need be. Bristol isn't necessarily his best track by any means, but I do think that he could claw some points back if he can be in the right position at the right time. Of course, we're not going on the dirt Bristol this time, where he was one corner away basically from pulling off the slide job on Tyler Reddick. But we all know how that ended up. But he finished 20th at Darlington in the spring and 24th at Kansas. It's just not quite good enough. If he tries to repeat those results, he won't be anywhere near that cutoff line going into Bristol. So too big of a deficit for the 14 car to claw.
And just quickly for some context on kind of how far off they've been as of late, their last top 10, which was actually a top 5, was way back at the Coke 600. That's how long it's been.
And that was a crazy race.
And that was a crazy race, of course. But since then, a handful of top 15 finishes, but nothing inside the top 10. And that's not going to cut it here.
No. And especially on road courses late in the regular season, you'd think that he would have gotten to maybe a top 10 there, but had some interesting pit strategies, like you mentioned, that have kind of made it lack of points there for the 14. But next up on my list for eliminations is the Daytona 500 champ, Austin Cindric. I don't think this round quite lines up well for the two team. They're very lucky to be in the playoffs. If they did not get that win in the Daytona 500, they were nowhere near contending for wins throughout the regular season. So he's one of those 15 that did win in the regular season that is in the playoffs. Of course, Kurt Busch would be in it if not for the medical waiver, but he did finish 18th at Darlington, not the best there. And then Kansas was 11th. And I don't think their mile-and-a-half speed has been anything tremendous. And Darlington is not necessarily a place where I think Austin Cindric could be a contender for the top 10. There are so many good guys that race at Darlington. There's so many guys that are consistent there week in and week out. And their short track stuff has been kind of mediocre at best. So I don't think this round lines up well for Cindric. And I think he's going to be the second guy that I have out in the round of 16.
I do have Cindric making it through to the round of 12. So I'll talk about him a little bit later. But my second elimination, I kind of mentioned it earlier. I do have Austin Dillon being eliminated in the round of 16. And I really thought about putting him through because this round does shape up pretty well for him. When you look historically at his results at Darlington, of course, there was the great round of 16 he had a couple of years ago, I think it was, where he was a late winner in the season, squeaked into the playoffs, and all of a sudden he was running at the front in the round of 16. But for Austin Dillon,
finished second that one race to Kevin Harvick there. Yeah,
exactly. So, and there was like the great Richmond run and everything. Like he had a couple good ones. But for Austin Dillon here, I like their consistency this season. They've consistently finished races, but they haven't had kind of that high end speed. Of course, the plate races and things like that, the super speedway package is always great for RCR and for Austin Dillon, but we don't have any of that in the round of 16. And for Dillon here, coming off of the win is going to be a great momentum booster coming into the playoffs here. But I just haven't seen enough of that kind of high-end potential. Granted, it's the round of 16. There's a lot of chaos that can happen, especially at a race like Darlington and things like that. So if he keeps it clean, he finishes races, he might be able to point his way through. But I think they've got a deficit that they've already got to try to overcome. They haven't shown enough speed this year. And even though the round of 16 shapes up pretty well for Dillon, looking at his kind of historical results, I just don't quite see him making it through with how competitive this round of 16 is.
It's a very competitive round of 16. And I agree with you entirely. Even if you put Richmond in there instead of Kansas this time around, I think that there's a pretty good shot that he could potentially move on. This round shapes up well for the 3-car, but I as well have Austin Dillon going out in this first round, just having no stage point bonus, just going in there with 5 playoff points. I know it's not that big of a deficit to the cutoff line, but when you're at a disadvantage, it always makes you go a little bit more over aggressive in a strategy, trying to compensate for that lack of playoff points to begin the playoffs. And I think that could be the case once again here for Austin Dillon. He was in the right place at the right time at Daytona. Congrats to him on that huge victory for him. Last time he was in the playoffs was 2020, of course, but he finished 9th at Darlington in the spring and Kansas was 13th. So not too bad. If he keeps that kind of finishing around there in this round, he could absolutely move on if other guys make mistakes in front of him. I just don't know if he'll be in contention for the stage points enough with the qualifying speed that they've shown this season to be in a position at Bristol where they can go out and advance to that next round. So I as well have Austin Dillon out as the third guy for my round of 16.
All righty. Do you want to go with your third pick now, or do you want me to go?
I've got my 3 already. I've got Briscoe,
that's
Cindric,
right.
and Dillon. Right. So up to you for your third.
All right. Number 3. I'll go with the third one here. I'll go with Daniel Suarez out in the round of 16. I like Suarez. I like Trackhouse. I don't like how this round shapes up for them very much. Suarez he's kind of had an up and down season. When he's had speed, he's been really there at the front, challenging for top fives and strong results inside the top 10. When he hasn't, it's kind of been nowhere in like the top 15, trying to do too much and kind of suffering the results because of that. So for Suarez, in this pressure situation, it's the first time he's in this situation in his career after being on the bubble on the outside looking in quite a bit when he was at Joe Gibbs Racing and with Stuart Haas. And I just don't think it's quite their time, looking at kind of how this round shapes up for them and for the competitiveness, once again, of the rest of this round. Of course, their win came at a road course, no road course in this round. And we could see a good result come out of that team for sure. I just don't know if the longevity is there. Some longer races like Darlington and some of the other results later in the round. So for me, I've got Daniel Suarez missing out on the round of 12.
I have Daniel Suarez advancing to the round of 12. I do think that he has shown enough to me this season where I think he can get that extra boost to cross that finish line and make it to that next round. Kansas, he was running fourth, I believe, at the time he wrecked in the spring. So he was no slouch there in terms of speed.
That's one thing I will say. I really like Trackhouse's 1.5 mile speed. So that could be a difference maker.
Yeah. And the road courses, obviously not a factor in this round. That's unfortunate for Suarez. He's done very, very well on those in his entire career, not just for Trackhouse this season, but he's always been a consistent player in that top 15, top 10. But I don't mind their short track program as well either. I think that Chastain has given them enough of a boost here where they could try and replicate that setup to an extent on Suarez's car if they need to. Bristol's going to be a big wild card here because we have not raced on this Bristol here, and we know how the short tracks have been so far this season. Are we going to see the classic Bristol with both lines, or is it going to be bottom dominated, top dominated? We'll see in 3 weeks, but I think Daniel Suarez has shown enough that he could be consistent enough to be in that fringe top 10. And I just like their stage point speed at Kansas where they could do the job and be in a position where they can advance at Bristol. That's basically what it comes down to for me, for Daniel Suarez. But for my final guy eliminated in the round of 16, I'm going Alex Bowman. He's been absolutely super mediocre this entire season, even below average, probably even like just terrible for what you consider Hendrick Motorsports equipment. And when you look at what his teammates have done in terms of race wins, and I mean, William Byron, a little bit less so, that consistency and that speed over the summer months has been nowhere. It's been very similar to the 48s in a lot of respects, but Alex Bowman is at a deficit with playoff points, coming in as the 15th seed. I don't quite like his chances, and these tracks don't really line up well for him either. In his career, they just haven't been his best. He finished 29th in the spring at Darlington and then 9th at Kansas. I don't consider him the best short track racer either when it comes to Bristol. I think there's going to be a lot more guys contending for that rather than Bowman. So I don't know what the 48 has done this season. Remember, this car won 4 races last season, and the speed has just been nowhere compared to the likes of Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson really throughout this season. So Alex Bowman for me is the 4th guy I have out in that round of 16.
I have Bowman out in this round as well. One top 10 in the last 11 races. I will say I do like their 1.5 mile speed, and that could be a difference maker if they get a bunch of points out of Kansas, like you mentioned there, with a decent top 10 there earlier this year. But a decent top 10 out of 1 of 3 races isn't going to cut it. They're going to need 2, probably 3 solid finishes if they're not going to be up inside the top 5 challenging for a win. We've seen Alex Bowman turn it around in the playoffs before. We had him out early a couple of years ago, and he almost went all the way to the championship 4 with a late surge. But for Bowman here, just haven't seen enough of it recently. And especially with Ives kind of retiring, moving to a different role, I just don't see it for them this year.
I just don't think you can flip a switch with this car this year. I would feel differently in the previous generation of cars. Sometimes they experiment over the summer months, and that can lead to a different performance when you have kind of built that car up. But this is a new year. This is a new car. People aren't going to be messing around in the summer months. They need the points that they can get. And if they realized that the path they were going down was the wrong one, they could have done that a long time ago and reverted to a different strategy. But the 48 has just been nowhere in the top 10 conversation whatsoever for the past 3-4 months. And that's just disappointing all around for a team that looked so strong and had momentum coming into this season after the results in 2021. But the round of 12 is upon us. This is the scary round. This is the nightmare round.
It's the chaos round
of anybody in the field, they can probably look at it this way. Road courses have been especially challenging and chaotic this season. And I don't see why the Charlotte Roval would not live up to their expectations in 2022. Talladega, when we look at what just happened at Daytona, it could easily happen again at Talladega with the stakes on the line as high as they are. And then Texas, oh my goodness. This is a track that is very difficult to pass on, but it can lead to some chaotic racing at times. Very much one groove. We saw it at the All-Star race. We had a lot of wrecks in the All-Star race. Blaney ended up surviving that, of course. So I don't know what to expect from this round. It's just going to be boom or bust. Some high seeds could go out. It could be predictable with some of the low seeds still remaining going out. We'll see what happens. But Kyle, who do you have out in this round of 12 as your first pick?
Round of 12 is the chaos round, to say the least. And I think that there's a lot of potential swings here with how close everything has been this season. My first one out in the round of 12, though, is going to be somebody that is a decent candidate to go out in the round of 16 as well, just based off of recent performance. And that's William Byron. He has been nowhere these last handful of weeks. And actually looking at his race results, he doesn't have a top 10 in the last 10 races. His last top 10 came at Sonoma. His last top 10 at a non-road course was his win at Martinsville. That's how long it has been for William Byron since he finished in the top 10. Now, that could have easily changed at Darlington had he not been punted in the closing stages of that race and things like that.
I jinxed it.
But for William Byron here, that's why I've got him making it through to the round of 12 because of that speed at Darlington he showed earlier this year, because of some of the prowess at a couple of the other tracks as well. But for William Byron here, round of 12, chaos round, and their lack of speed overall, I just don't see them making it much further than this.
I agree. Oh, man, it pains me to do that because I really thought when he got those 2 early wins this season, this was going to be the breakout year for Byron. This was the year that he was going to be a legit championship 4 contender if he could carry that kind of speed that they showed early on into the summer months and then leading into the playoffs. But that has just not been the case. So really unfortunate for him, but just that lack of speed and consistency just prevents me from moving him on to the next round. It's very tough to say. William Byron is, when you look at this round, especially Talladega, always a wild card. Roval, they've been okay on road course. Hasn't been anything spectacular. Not the William Byron we've seen with the qualifying speed in the previous seasons. Hasn't quite been there so far in 2022. And the 1.5 mile speed hasn't been too bad, but it's not been anything that takes your breath away. And when you look at the guys he's competing against, you need to be a little bit more competitive than his peers. So William Byron's out for me. Next guy I have out is a guy that I just had squeaking through to this round. It's Daniel Suarez. The difference between us in that first round, I think he'll have the speed. I just don't know if he'll have the playoff points to really compete with the other guys. Like when you look at the round subjectively, like the Charlotte Roval to road course, he won on a road course this season. That should bode well for him. Texas, he's been pretty decent there. If he were to move on to this round, it's always been a decent track for him. And they got good 1.5 mile speed. And Talladega, he isn't too bad of a super speedway racer, but I wouldn't put him in the top echelon of competing week in and week out. There's no real reason I'm putting Daniel Suarez out in this round. I just think that I like the other guys a little bit more. The round shapes up for him pretty nice on paper, but I don't like him coming in as the 13th seed when you look at some of the guys he's going to have to compete against, and he will likely be the lowest seed based off my predictions on who's going into that round of 12. So Daniel Suarez is the second guy I have out in that round of 12.
Yep. Similarly, the one difference we had, I had Austin Cindric squeaking through, and I do have him out in this round, which is something to say because we've seen Penske be able to pick up points at road courses, of course, with Cindric's speed all season long, with a couple of top 5 finishes on the road courses. We've also seen him, of course, win the Daytona 500. But for Cindric here, it's just too much of a chaos round, and I don't see him winning either of Talladega or the Roval for him to go through and make it through to the round of 8. I do have him making it to this point. I just think that there's enough Penske speed there, and if he plays it smart and just kind of bides his time, I think there's going to be a lot of playoff guys that have trouble in the first round, in particular at Darlington, just because of how long the race is. We saw the chaos that there was in the first race this year, and this is an even longer one. So if they just kind of do their own thing, don't let the race come to them, I think they can pick up points early if they play it smart. And I like some of their speed at some of the other tracks there in that round. Just when it comes to the round of 12, don't quite see him getting the win that I think he'll need to make it through to the round of 8. So I've got Cindric out in this round.
Probably a realistic bet based off of what we've seen so far from the 2 car, but you never know. Anything could happen in this round. Really, it's going to be
an win one of the last
chaos.
2 races of that round. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. The third guy I have out in the round of 12, Denny Hamlin. I think the hunt for the first championship is going to have to wait another season. He's just been too inconsistent all year long. Had that kind of late strategy call there at Richmond where he was on the 2 stop, and that paid off with the tire advantage there to get past Byron there late. I have a tough time gauging the 11 car's overall speed because he's just been kind of boom or bust, whether he's been having pit road speeding penalties or what have you. It's just been a plethora of mistakes across the board that have kind of prevented him from getting those consistent finishes. And I think that's really hard to do when the pressure is on you the most when it comes to these playoffs. So I don't really love their 1.5 mile speed compared to their teammates as much. I think the 18 and the 20 are much better at that. And the road courses, as we know, have been a complete wreck fest and struggle fest and everything fest for the Toyotas in 2022. So this round does not shape up well for Hamlin. Texas hasn't been historically a great track for him either. So I think that the championship for 2 consecutive year appearances is going to have to end. The streak ends for the 11 car in 2022 here.
I've got him out here as well. Just simply for a lot of the same stuff you're saying, the inconsistency. When they've been fast, they've been really fast. But really, when you look at this round, there's one opportunity for them to go out and kind of book their ticket in a win, and that's Texas. And I like a lot of other drivers more and a lot of teams more at that track. Talladega is always a threat with Hamlin's super speedway prowess, but he's been better at Daytona than he has Talladega. And I just don't like the Toyotas whatsoever at road courses. So I've got Hamlin out here as well.
Wow. We have them out in the same round. I've seen a lot of similarities here, Kyle.
Yeah. 3 for 3 in this round, essentially, with Suarez and Cindric being our only difference in round of 16. I'll lead things off for the final one here. And it's a bit of a bold one. I'll be honest. I have Ross Chastain out in this round.
Whoa! He's done it. Go Ross into Chastain it. Explain yourself.
Out in the round of 12. And this is a risky one, I'll be honest, because I like their 1.5 mile speed. They're a threat at Texas. We saw them at the All-Star race up at the front until he decided to take flight. Then we know at Talladega and super speedways, we know Chastain is super aggressive. We see it everywhere. He's a threat to win those tracks. He won it earlier this year, and Trackhouse has been arguably the best team on road courses in terms of pace at each road course, every place they've gone this year. So Chastain could very easily win any 3 of those races, book his ticket, go on his way through. I just think at this point of the playoffs, he's made too many enemies. He doesn't have the experience in those pressure situations to kind of overcome that. And I think there's a lot of experienced drivers with teams that have more experience that will be going to tracks for the second time and improving on the results from earlier in the year to where all of that will combine. And I think that Trackhouse will have both of their drivers out in the round of 16 and the other one in the round of 12. I have Chastain out in the round of 12.
Holy smokes. It's a big call. It's a big, bold call. It's almost as bold as TMU. It's almost as bold as that.
Okay.
Almost.
We're not doing that here.
We're not going to do that here. I cannot fault you on this because I looked at the 1 car very, very heavily here. I thought if it's going to happen, potentially payback at the Roval when it matters most, if he's in a kind of a dire situation or not locked himself into that next round. He's like, 15 points, maybe above the cutoff line. The enemies can make his day a whole lot worse. And I think that there's going to be a lot of guys going in there with nothing to lose. Chastain is definitely a guy that could be under threat there, but I just think the speed on the 1.5 miles is going to be a little bit too much. And he does have a pretty decent playoff point advantage over the guys that he is in a rivalry with. So I do have Ross Chastain moving on to the round of 8. I don't think their speed is a fluke. They've clearly shown that throughout the season. The past couple of weeks haven't been fantastic for them, but they have been in position, just haven't had the execution. For me, the last guy out in the round of 12 is Christopher Bell. This one is a tough one for me. I was very close between Bell and Kyle Busch. I think both of them are very similar in terms of their speed throughout the season. They finished very, very close in the regular season point standings next to each other. But the advantage I gave to Kyle Busch over Bell was that rough stretch of results for 8 weeks there without a top 10 was the determining factor. A lot of that was bad luck. I would put down to lack of speed on the 18 car. Well, I think the 20 has had very bright spots. They've come to life here a little bit. I love Adam Stevens as a crew chief. We talked about this on this show plenty of times, but I just think that Christopher Bell, when I look at the Charlotte Roval, hasn't been a fantastic track for him. I don't think he's a bad road racer, but the Roval is not a road course. That is a road course and an oval put together. It's a mismatch, and I don't think that it quite gels with Bell. And Texas is a great track for him, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's a great super speedway racer either. So when you look at that combined with the playoff points and look who he's racing against, likely his teammate for maybe that cutoff position, I'm going to give the edge to Kyle Busch over Christopher Bell in that round of 12.
I like it.
All righty. Round of 8. This is it. This is where we decide the championship for a very nice looking round of 8. I must say, Vegas, very good race in the spring. Homestead, the last track. We do not know what the next gen car will look like when we get to that point in the season. And then Martinsville, a ultimate wild card. But when you look at the spring, incredibly hard to pass. They had a tire test there last week, trying to get some rubber down. It seemed like they did a little bit of a better job with that. We'll see if passing improves with that, if they bring a better tire for the fall race there. But we know how Martinsville can get no matter what in that presser packed penultimate race of the season. So Kyle, who do you have out as your first guy in that round of 8?
Well, you just talked about him. I've got Christopher Bell out in this round. I've got him just squeaking through in the round of 12, thanks to some help from some other people, maybe having some poor results and things like that. Christopher Bell has low-key been one of the more consistent Joe Gibbs cars all season long. I especially like his kind of short track speed in terms of those kind of mile to sub-mile and a half, but mile in length tracks, those kind of hybrid ones. He's been really fast all year long. So if he can squeak through to the championship 4, he's a legit dark horse candidate. Yeah. Absolutely. I just don't think he quite gets to that point. I don't love how the penultimate round shapes up for him with Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville. He could have a good result at one of those 3 races. I just don't see him having a good result at all 3, good enough to win or beating some of the other people that I have in my round of 8. So Christopher Bell, like you said, out in the round of 12 for you, I've got him squeaking through, but as one of the first guys out in the round of 8.
Yeah, I would love it if Bell could make it to that distance. That would be good for him, that entire team. That's the farthest he would have ever gotten in his playoff career to this point.
Low-key, really solid season for them. They were 15th, 16th in points season long last year, and they're up inside the top 10 this year. They've definitely improved in terms of their consistency this year.
Definitely. The first guy I have out in the round of 8 is the guy that you have out in the round of 12, Ross Chastain. This is where I think the enemies will come into play.
That's what it is for you. Okay.
At Martinsville. If he does not win at Vegas, then I don't think he'll win at Homestead. I don't think that's the greatest track for him when it comes to tire conservation. That's a skill. It's not necessarily how fast the car can be. That's just very much a skill. And we see what Homestead has brought. There's a lot of contenders there, namely Tyler Reddick, who we both have at this point in our playoff grid that could look to win at Homestead there. And then Martinsville, I don't necessarily see him as a short track racer as the best. Martinsville, he ran decent there in the spring, but I don't necessarily think he'll be in a position there because he's going to get wrecked. He's going to get dumped. He's going to get taken out. And the enemies that he's accrued throughout the entire season are going to come back to bite him when it matters most. And that's going to be, I think, hopefully a wake-up call for him when you look at what this season has been. He's had speed. It's just channeling that speed and that aggression to where it matters most. And I think it's going to come bite him in the butt at Martinsville there when he could be in a position to advance if he hadn't won one of those first 2 races in the round of 8. It's going to come down to that. And I think he's going to get the bump and run and going to get the bunt into the wall for the number 1 car. So Ross Chastain's playoff hopes and championship hopes end the round of 8 for me.
All right. Number 2 for me going out in the round of 8, Joey Logano out in the round of 8 for me. I just don't really like how this round shapes up for him versus some of the other people that are in the round of 8 for myself. For Logano, as of late with this car and kind of looking back to last year as well, their bread and butter has kind of been the shorter tracks. When you look at his success at Darlington, of course, the bump and run, everything like that, but also at Gateway, leading off the season at the Coliseum, things like that. And he could go out and do it at Martinsville. There's just other guys I like more at Martinsville. And I think that they're going to have a hole to try and dig themselves out of after Vegas and Homestead. So Logano, he's absolutely a championship threat if he makes it to that championship 4. I just think that they're going to have too much of a hole to climb out of after the 2 mile and a halves in this round. And I don't have him quite making it through.
It's a bold statement. The second seed coming in, and you don't have the second or third seed in your championship 4. I told you before. A little bit of a spicy one. A little bit of a spicy one. I like it. I like it a lot. For me, the second guy I have out is his teammate, Ryan Blaney. The story of him getting to that point in the season will have been incredible in itself when you consider he made the playoffs by 3 positions throughout the first 26 races of the season over Martin Truex Jr., who is unbelievably not in the playoffs after being in the championship 4. It seems like almost every season he's always a threat to win the championship. This is a runner up from last year, and he did not make it to this 10 race playoffs. It's insane to think about, but I do think Ryan Blaney will run out of steam at that point. Just doesn't quite have that race winning speed. He's been very consistent. There's a reason why he was in that top 5 in points, but there's a reason why he also didn't win races. He was just super consistent. I think the first round doesn't line up too well for him. He could be a guy that could be a little bit of a fringe on making it out of there. That second round, I think, lines up extremely well for Ryan Blaney. And then it all comes down to, I think, Martinsville for him. I think he could be good. I think that there could be some guys there that are just going to be that tad bit better than that 12 car when it matters most. So I don't think Ryan Blaney will make it to his first ever championship 4 appearance. He'll miss out in 2022.
I had Ryan Blaney written down as an elimination in my round of 8. I've changed my mind. I'm pushing him through.
So, man, you're pulling a Lukas here. You're making a switch on the fly.
I know.
What's going on?
What am I doing here? But third out in this round for me, honestly, before a couple of certain wins, we probably would have had him out much earlier, if not even making the playoffs. Kevin Harvick out in this round for me. Honestly, impressive to get to this point, given all the concerns that we've had for him leading up until his back-to-back wins, of course. But for Harvick, I just think that it's less about him. I think he'll have some good results in this round. I just think it's more so about some of the competition at this point. So for me, I've got Harvick out in this round. SHR, particularly Harvick, has kind of had a resurgence later in the year. Harvick in particular, it's kind of seemed like SHR started strong with Briscoe when it kind of shifted to Harvick as the season went along and Harvick started to become more accustomed to this car. But I look at Vegas and Homestead, there's guys that I like more there. And Martinsville, we've seen in the past, hasn't been a great place for Harvick overall. So I don't really love how this round shapes out up for him, given where their strengths have been and the strengths of the people challenging him in this round of 8. So I've got Harvick out in the round of 8.
I as well have Kevin Harvick out in the round of 8. I think the fact that he is at that point, if he does make it there, will be a saving of a season for the 4 car. Then you can look at it as, we had those 2 wins. Maybe he gets a third in the playoffs if things go his way. You never know with this season, especially. But Kevin Harvick, to make it to that point, I agree with you. The round just does not quite line up with his strengths overall as a race car driver. I think Vegas could be hit or miss. Homestead isn't necessarily his greatest track. And then Martinsville, nowhere near a contender where I could see him competing with the guys that are very, very consistent there. Year in and year out, you can definitely lock in 3 or 4 names every time we go to Martinsville that are going to be in that top 5, top 6 range. But I don't think Kevin Harvick is one of them. And that could be the ultimate downfall of the 4 cars. So at a little bit of in the kind of the middle there of playoff points as well, sitting 9th coming in. So he's not in the worst spot in the world when you look at who we both have moving on at that point, who's around him. But I don't think he'll be able to suffice and compete with those other guys. Like you said, the strength of the competition in that round will be at an all-time high. So Kevin Harvick is my third guy out in the championship or the round of 8, excuse me. So who do you got? Final one, lock in your championship for with this last elimination.
I changed my mind again. Ryan Blaney's out in the round of 8.
What are you?
I know. I'm sorry. I looked at the numbers again, and I just it's less about Ryan Blaney and more about the speed that I like in some other people. So Ryan Blaney, I've got out in the round of 8. Honestly, I'll say what it was. It was between Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney for myself for this last spot, and I just like Kyle Busch's mile and a half speed a bit more. I think Blaney can go out and win at Texas in the round before that, but I like the way that Vegas and Homestead shape up more for Busch. So there it is. Busch makes it through. Blaney's out.
I can't believe you're putting Kyle Busch through to Homestead on a flip of a decision. You think you're me? I
know.
I don't know what's going on. What the heck's happening in this situation? But for me, I have Kyle Busch out in the round of 8.
Okay.
Do you know how hard that is for me to say that you have Kyle Busch going further than me? It's very difficult. But
fake fam.
The short track speed just hasn't quite been there for them this season. It will help that he's going to Bristol in that first round, I think, for sure. And that's just a track that he always does well at, no matter how much speed or how much of the car he has underneath him. But Martinsville has been kind of a hit or miss track for him recently. He had a good stretch there in the kind of mid 2010s, but the last couple of years hasn't quite had that race winning speed or in that top 5 contention. Some guys have surpassed him there. I love his mile and a half speed. I think he could be the guy, if he makes it there, to win his way, because he was 2 laps away from winning at Vegas without that fluke caution at the end in the spring. He has a tremendous record there at Vegas. I think he could definitely win there, but I just don't know if Homestead, it will be enough for him. He's been good there. He's been very consistent, but I like another guy to win there more than him. And I have him in my championship 4, as do you.
I think we're on the exact same page.
And it will all come down to if he can win Vegas. What I've seen from this season, there's just been no luck. I don't know how much the contract discussions are going to distract him going into the playoffs. We'll see how long that looms large over the 18 car.
Is the car he's taken over to get to the championship 4.
Get out of here. We're not doing that on this episode. We'll wait till that's official. But Kyle Busch is my 4th and final guy out in that round of 8.
Yeah. Alrighty. Championship 4 time.
One thing before we get into the championship 4. We have done this last year. I wanted to look at it again. The lowest seed to ever make the championship 4 in the stage racing era is the 7th seed. This year, if our predictions are correct, Tyler Reddick will be the lowest one.
I'd have 2. I'd have Kyle Busch as well.
And Kyle Busch would be the 11th seed, making it in. So that is a huge shift from what we've seen. Basically, if you're in that top half in the championship playoff grid going into the playoffs, you have a pretty darn good shot of advancing yourself into that championship 4 round. But unlike most seasons, we have not had a dominant guy per se with race wins and stage wins throughout the regular season. Chase Elliott, of course, is the regular season champion. He has the most playoff points by 15 over his competition. That's a huge bonus for that 9 team to move him forward. But there is a definitely shortened gap between basically everybody else through the rounds. So anybody could go out in any round, basically, if things don't go their way. Just thought it was important to note that this could be the year that we go back to pre-stage racing era, when we had the 10th, the 11th, the 13th seed. We had the 16th seed in the first season of this playoff format, being Ryan Newman, make it to that championship 4.
Almost won it.
And almost won it. So this could be a replication of that, or some variation of that in 2022 when you look at the season we've had. So championship 4 time. Let's go through who we have left before we get into who we rank. So Kyle, who do you have as your championship 4?
Yeah. So I've got Chase Elliott here. Haven't mentioned him once this show yet, because he's basically a lock for the championship 4. When you look at his past results, the regular season championship, everything. Of course, there's a couple of chaos rounds and things like that where things could happen. But I think most people are going to have Elliott in the championship 4 once again, as with his teammate Kyle Larson. They've come on really strong in the second half of the regular season. And again, just looking at what they did last year, how things are shaping up this year, I think most people are going to have those 2 as kind of the championship 4. And the other 2 spots, I think, is where it gets kind of crazy. And so I do have Kyle Busch making it to this point. I think that the mile and a half speed in the first 2 races of the round of 8 are going to really help them there. Maybe pick up a win at Vegas or something like that, and do good enough at Martinsville to maybe point their way through. And I do have Tyler Reddick making it all the way to the championship 4, because I do think that he's going to be good enough through the first 2 rounds to make it to the round of 8. And like we kind of alluded to earlier, I think he wins his way through to the championship 4 at Homestead.
Exactly. I agree with you entirely on Tyler Reddick. I was hoping that we would be similar landing on him because I felt like an idiot before the show. I'm like, does it make sense for me to put him here? Like, Can I realistically see the 8 car, an RCR car that has not made the championship
RCR
since Ryan Newman in 2014? They have not made it to this point. Could be massive for that entire team. I think Tyler Reddick is definitely a guy that is the dark horse candidate coming into the playoffs to go and compete for a championship. So I have him in there as well. Similarly to you, I have both Hendrick guys in Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, but then I also have Joey Logano making it to that championship 4 as well. So we have 3 past champions, the defending champion, of course, in Kyle Larson, and 1 newbie. I always like the newbies when it comes to the championship 4, but let's look. What are we going 1 to 4? Let's break it down. Who do you have 4th in the championship race?
4th for the championship race. I will have Tyler Reddick here. Lack of experience, lack of overall speed from the team, things like that. I just think it'll be too much to overcome. So I've got Reddick number 4, even though they did have a good run at Phoenix earlier this year.
For me, it's going to be Joey Logano coming 4th. I think he'll be kind of like the Penske guy that kind of lingers around. Wait, but
I know what you mean.
There's always a Penske guy in that championship 4 that kind of lingers around and shows some speed off the gate. We've seen that at Phoenix with him. I think it was last year, was it, where he was very, very good for speed, and then it completely dipped off in the second half of the race. We have no idea where that speed went on the 22 car. It was just kind of a wrong adjustment, but something like that is something to keep in mind. Logano's wins, a punt for William Byron coming to the white flag at Darlington, and then a green-white checkered against Kyle Busch at Gateway. Those are his 2 wins. Gateway is a very similar kind of S track to Phoenix in some way, so you could look at that speed there, but I don't think he was necessarily the best car that day. So I do think Joey Logano will fall short of a second title, finishing 4th.
Yeah. Alrighty. Number 3. Do you want to go your number 3? Do you want me?
Let's just keep going. You go first.
Number 3 here. I will say Kyle Busch. I think it'll be a Hendrick battle at the front. I just think Chevy's had the most speed all season long, most consistent speed, and I think it will see a battle between the 2 Hendrick cars come to the end of this season once again. So I've got Kyle Busch coming in 3rd. A valiant effort in what is looking like it's going to be his last season with Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't want to lean into it too much because we'll get to it, I'm sure, plenty once official news and stuff comes down.
But a long episode.
Yeah, exactly. But more of a therapy session, really. But Kyle Busch, valiant effort to make it to the championship 4, all things considered. I think he comes up short.
All righty. I have Kyle Larson, the defending champion, finishing 3rd in that championship race. The championship curse. We've never seen a guy go back to back in this format, and I don't think that that trend rewrites itself this time around in November. I think Larson's been decent this season, nowhere near his self from last year. That was an unprecedented 10-win season that led him to a championship. He was by far the best car, by far the best driver last year. Has been good. Of course, had that late regular season win at Watkins Glen, but prior to that, hadn't won since the second race of the season at Auto Club. So a long break in between that, but he is picking up speed at the right time later in that regular season. I just don't know if it'll be enough for him to win the championship. I don't think he necessarily even had the best car at Phoenix last year and the year that he was so dominant. I think he just falls short here, finishing 3rd at Phoenix.
Yep. I agree on that one. In terms of how he won the championship race last year, it was pit road that got him the track position, and he held on to it, but he did not have the dominant car whatsoever.
All righty. This is it. Where we define a champion for yourself. You have the 2 Hendrick cars, Elliott and Larson. For me, I have Elliott and Tyler Reddick going for the championship in 2022. Kyle, take it away.
Championship winning his 2nd in his career, Chase Elliott is going to be the guy for myself. Look, it's easy to try and pick the regular season champion as the overall champion, but I think Chase Elliott has shown the most speed at the most places to get to the championship 4. And once we get there, we've seen him have a dominant car before. We've seen him do it before. And looking just this season alone, because it is a new car and things like that, he does have the most points accrued this season on sub-mile-and-a-half tracks. Of course, that includes some tracks that don't really apply, like Martinsville and things like that. But just kind of looking overall at tracks that are sub-mile and have to try and have a decent sample size, Chase Elliott leads the way this season. And if he gets to that point, I think he'll be able to make good on that, and has a pretty big gap actually in terms of points accrued at those at that track type to the rest of the championship four I have. So I think overall Elliott's the best the best bet to make it to the championship four. And of the championship four guys I have him being the best guy at this track type, at this track. He's my champion this year.
All righty. So you think Kyle Larson falls one spot short, essentially, from a championship?
Yep.
All righty. Well, for the sake of being different, Tyler Reddick is my pick to win
smokes.
The 2022 NASCAR Cup Series Championship. RCR dethrones Hendrick Motorsports atop of the sport this season. Look, if he didn't have that good of a car in the spring, he'd be nowhere near contention for me when I look at Phoenix. But the fact that he ran that well in a race that wasn't too chaotic, of course, Chase Briscoe won the race, but Tyler Reddick was definitely in that mix, fighting for the lead, late in that going. And also, I do think that there could be a little bit of a wrinkle between the two Hendrick Motorsports teammates when it comes down to it. These two clearly have had a little bit of a dispute in the past couple of weeks, considering Watkins Glen. Maybe they rough each other on a late race restart where they're both fighting for the win. There could be some contact. You never know in a situation like that. And I always have liked the guy that comes in there as the new guy with no pressure whatsoever for a championship race. I think Tyler Reddick is that guy this season. He'd be the new guy in that championship four. It is so difficult to win that second championship. I think that Tyler Reddick becomes a Cup Series champion at the end of this, will be the lowest seed ever in the stage racing era to come out and win it. This has been a crazy season. I think with all of the contract stuff that's been going on around RCR and Tyler Reddick and Kyle Busch and whatever is going on around that, with him leaving the team going into 2024 for 2311 Racing, I would never have thought that they would give him a position here where they could go for a Cup Series title, but I think the playoffs line up really well for the 8 car. And I think that he could be the guy that gets it done when it all is said and done at Phoenix. So Tyler Reddick beats Chase Elliott to the line for the Cup Series championship.
That's TMU bold right there. Holy smokes. RCR champion. Wow.
Yeah. This is my rationale. If Kyle Busch goes there,
I was going to say, this is you.
He's going to a championship winning organization.
There it is.
Man. You know, in all seriousness, I think it's a bit of a stretch for sure, but I did want to go bold with this because it has been such a cool stretch. It's been a bold season, and I cannot believe how crazy it has been. I've never seen a season really like this where there's been so many different winners. I mean, the playoff system has never seen a situation like this where basically it was win and you're in. And it used the format to basically perfection. Kurt Busch, if he's in it, it is 16 different winners in the playoffs this season. It is insane. And you include Ryan Blaney, who won an all-star race, and that's 17 different winners across all the things that have happened technically in the regular season. It is just unfathomable what we've seen. And I just think a season like this is just too good to predict the regular season champion coming out on top. I got to go bold. I'll say the underdog gets it done
I love it.
At Phoenix. But there you have it. Our 2022 playoff predictions. It's been a lot of fun to look at what this season and these next 10 weeks have in store. Kyle, your final thoughts on the playoff predictions before we look at this newest introductory segment of the draft?
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun playoffs. Look, I'm not the hugest fan of the format in terms of picking the fairest champion, but in terms of entertainment, and that's exactly what NASCAR wants, it shapes up to be a fantastic playoffs this year, whether it's the handful of small changes they made to the actual schedule itself, whether it's the drivers and how tightly packed in they are, with all the different winners, with the lack of a dominant force at the top, all things like that. And some of the underlying storylines, like you mentioned, Larson, Elliott, does anything happen there? Not even just from Watkins Glen, but just kind of the overall budding of which one is the leader at Hendrick and stuff like that, whether it's the Ross Chastain stuff, whether it's Hamlin and whether he can find consistency, whether it's Kyle Busch and whatever's going on with his contract, all these different things. There's a lot of really interesting storylines going into these playoffs.
Definitely going to be a crazy 10 weeks. I think it could be the craziest playoffs we've seen in recent memory, with the jumbled up playoff grid, some big names that don't have many playoff points, some smaller names that have a lot of playoff points. And it's going to be Fascinating to see if rivalries from the regular season, if they come into effect. Is it all talk? Is it going to actually come out and play out on the racetrack? It all remains to be seen over the next 10 weeks. And that is why this time of the season is definitely insane for playoffs, for just sports in general. It's the craziest time of the year when it comes down to September, October, and November. And that is no different in 2022. So that has been our playoff predictions for 2022. We'll see how right, we'll see how wrong we are when it comes down to the final lap at Phoenix and who comes out on top hoisting the Cup Series championship trophy. So that'll do it for the playoff predictions for today's episode.
Absolutely. Shall we do fantasy draft time?
We should. Oh my Lord. This is it. This is the new segment that we are introducing to you fine folks here this season. For the remainder of the playoffs, we're going to do something like this. Let us know what you guys think of the new segment down in the comment section. We'd really, really appreciate it. So we're going to do a draft. So if you're familiar with the fantasy format, there was usually 6 picks. We couldn't have the entire 6 the same drivers as we usually would. We couldn't have the same 6 drivers across both of our lineups. And then we'd have our stage winners or our manufacturer winners or the race winner pick, all that kind of stuff. We're going to throw that out the window because it was getting a little too similar with what we were doing. So we're going to go 5 picks each. We're going to go, I think, are we going to go snake style or do you want to go back snake style? Yeah. Perfect. And then, back and forth here and we'll see who has a better lineup after we'll accumulate the results. We'll let you know next week who won between the 5 picks who collected the most points at Darlington for this weekend. Remember, this is just for Darlington, the opening race of the playoffs. So I think I explained that decently. Is there anything else I'm missing there?
Just mainly we're looking to kind of get to the 10 best drivers we think going into a weekend, kind of give you a big kind of list of drivers that you can use for fantasy, but also just to keep an eye on as potential winner picks going into this weekend. With the old format, with the 6 drivers and things, we were often getting to basically 7 drivers, 8 drivers, a couple of differences here and there, but not much. But with this, we're trying to talk about a bit more drivers, a little bit shorter for each driver overall, but just kind of get to more of the grid and talk about who's a threat this upcoming weekend.
Yep, for sure. You want to kick it off here, Kyle? How do you? Who wants to go first?
So first pick for our season-long fantasy, which I've been getting my rear end handed to me after.
Let's just make that clear. Yes.
Yeah. But anyways, you did win Daytona, so instead of having the first pick, you have the option of taking the first pick and the 4th pick, or having the wraparound 2-3. Which do you prefer?
I'll take the wraparound 2-3.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you have the first overall pick in the TGF draft.
I will lead things off with Kyle Larson. He has been fantastic at Darlington his entire career. Somehow doesn't have a win yet. Not to spoil anything later on, but I think that changes this upcoming weekend. So I've got Larson.
All righty. Can't say I didn't think about wanting him as a second overall pick if you let him slide. Yep. But I will be taking the number 11 of Denny Hamlin as my first overall pick, second overall technically in the draft. I think the 11 car has just been so good in here in his career. I love that he's running the Xfinity Series race this weekend. Yep. I think that's a little bit of a bonus, just getting some laps on a track. I know it's 500 miles. You get a lot of laps around Darlington, but I think that the added track time will pay dividends. And he does have 2 wins here over the past 7 races. So that's not too shabby either. So the 11 car is my first pick. For my second pick in this draft, I'm going to go with arguably the fastest car in the spring, Ross Chastain. I think the one car before he got wrecked was really, really fast. Seemed like he was en route to another win there, but I don't see him maybe necessarily winning this weekend, but he'll be in that top 5 conversation for sure.
Yeah. I like that 2-3, the Hamlin Chastain duo. I'm sure that will be great morale for your team. The 4-5 wraparound for me, I will take Kevin Harvick with the 4th overall pick here. I really like their late season resurgence. The big thing for me, though, is the length of this race and Kevin Harvick being a methodical driver. I think that he'll be there at the end. If some of the chaos happens earlier, I think he'll be there in the mix at the end. So he's my number 4 pick. And number 5, I will take the defending race winner here in Joey Logano, 5th overall.
Well, he's not necessarily the defending race winner because he won the spring race, but that's not necessarily the last season. Okay,
technically. Okay, whatever. The most recent winner at Darlington. Is that better?
There we go. Okay. He's got it. He's on it. Alrighty, I gotta see who's left. I gotta refresh my brain here on who we have left here in the draft.
Yeah. So far, the top 5 picks were Larson, Hamlin, Chastain, Harvick, Logano. So you get the 6-7 wraparound here.
Here we go again. I'm going to take Tyler Reddick.
Okay.
As my next pick.
I like that.
After that, I'm going to take Kyle Busch.
Okay.
I think both of them are going to have pretty solid weekends. Kyle got involved in a wreck in the spring with Keselowski after he got in the wall. It seemed like he had a pretty fast car before that. And Reddick is always good at riding the rim here at these kind of, high tire wear, off throttle races. He finished second in the spring too. Of course, Byron got wrecked out there, so he was running third, but second nonetheless. I think he could be a dark horse there for the win this weekend.
All righty. I like that back-to-back. 8-9. I'm going off the board because it's 2 non-playoff drivers. Martin Truex Jr. is my 8th pick. No. And 9th, I'm taking Eric Jones as my 9th overall pick. I really, obviously, of course, when you look back at Eric Jones's days at JGR, some fantastic results at Darlington, had a top 10 streak at Darlington. They've had speed overall this season. I think without having the playoffs hanging over them, I think they'll be there at the end, be smart about it. And Jones is a guy that I think can capitalize if some playoff drivers make some mistakes early. So he's going to be my last pick overall, but the 9th pick in this draft. And Truex is kind of Truex. He's usually quite good at Darlington. So there we go.
Interesting. I did not see the Eric Jones swing coming, but you know how I love Eric Jones.
I know.
I rate him pretty highly.
All righty. 10th overall. Wrapping it up.
My final pick, I'm going to go Chase Elliott.
Yeah.
He's sitting there. He's sitting there 10th overall. I have to take him. We'll just see what happens with the 9 car. I don't necessarily think this is his greatest track.
Yeah. Hasn't had great Darlington results, but it's Chase Elliott.
It's Chase Elliott. He won that Xfinity Series race in 2014. And that's all I remember him about. When
Probably
he
should have won Darlington Southern 500 a couple of years ago, whenever it was, when he had the little kerfuffle, shall we say, with Martin Truex Jr.
Yeah, that was the fantasy week where I think you had both of them in your lineup.
I had both of them in my lineup, and you didn't have either.
Wrecked each other.
And I lost.
Yeah. Let's hope that's not the case this time. But at least we're split on Truex and Elliott this weekend. I don't imagine Truex will be getting into the playoff.
I mean, you're the one with
there.
Hamlin and Chastain, so
I am taking the risk. I'm taking the new kind of Elliott Truex in this scenario. But that'll do it for the inaugural TGF draft. Nice and sweet, nice and simple. And
that was good.
I like that we'll have the picks online so you can see them out in visual form, but as well. But it's been a great return episode here, Kyle. Very fun to be back here for the back session of the season, crunch time. Everything you want to be.
Yep.
It's a great time to be back, and we'll have you covered every week with an episode as the playoffs unfold here with both NASCAR, and then we'll have some F1 sprinkled in there as well. We're going to record an F1 episode as well to get you set up for Zandvoort after the Belgian Grand Prix took place last weekend. So final thoughts here quickly, Kyle, before we wrap up the NASCAR episode here.
Yeah, good to be back. Hope you enjoyed some of the changes and stuff like that we're doing to the show, and hope you just enjoy that we're back in the first place. You can find the show on YouTube. We're going to be on all podcast platforms as well, if you prefer to just listen to the show, and we're going to have a lot of great stuff. So be sure to follow us on all different social media platforms, and everything is going to be a good time.
Definitely. We'll have a link to all of those in the description below. So you want to go check those out from the YouTube channel. We'd really, really appreciate that. It's been a great first episode. Glad to be back in the chair. Glad to be back behind the mic. And I think it's been a good first go around, and we'll see how right and wrong our playoff predictions have been. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman, signing off for now. We will talk to you soon with an F1 episode, but then next week for NASCAR as we set up Kansas. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.